I have been a soldier for 22 years, and in all that time I never once stood at attention for anyone I did not have to. Attention is a thing you give to rank, to the flag, to the dead. You do not give it freely. You especially do not give it to a person you spent 4 days treating like furniture. But there is a photograph on the wall of my house now, of a woman in a snow-crusted parka with her back to the camera, and every man who comes through my door eventually asks about it, and I tell them the same thing. I tell them that is the soldier I came to attention for in the snow, with no order given and no one watching but God and 60 frozen men, and that I would do it again on my knees if she asked, which she never would, because she was not the kind to ask for anything. Her name was Reyes. That is most of what I knew about her for the first 4 days, and I will be honest that I did not bother to learn more because I had decided in the first 10 minutes that she did not matter. I want to put that down plainly at the start, because the whole of this is the story of how wrong a man can be, and how the mountain does not care how wrong you are, it only waits to show you. Combat Outpost Kestrel sat on a shoulder of rock the men had named the Razor 8,000 feet up, above a cut in the range called Vesna Pass. The pass was the only thing for 40 miles that a column could move through in winter, which is why we were there, freezing on a rock the size of a parade field, 60 odd of us, holding a gate that nobody on either side wanted to walk through unless they had to. We had been there since the first snow. By the time Rays came up on the resupply bird, the men were the kind of tired that does not look like tiredness anymore. It looks like meanness. It looks like a unit that has stopped expecting anything good and started guarding what little it has left, which on Kestrel was warmth and chow and the right to be left alone. The bird came in low and hard through a sky the color of dishwater, and three things came off it. The mail, a pallet of fuel cans we needed worse than anything, and her. I was on the pad to count the fuel, not to meet anybody. She came down the ramp with a single rucksack and a long hard case and a clipboard tucked under one arm, and the clipboard is the thing I saw. A man learns to read a person fast on a mountain, and what I read was, evaluator, schoolhouse. Somebody's idea sent up from the rear to make sure we were doing our cold weather drills, the way the rear is always sending somebody up to make sure of something while the somebody who sent them sits by a stove. I had seen a dozen of them. They came, they checked their boxes, they wrote you up for the snow you tracked into the wrong tent, and they went home and put it on a slide. Sergeant, she said to me, not a question. She had a flat, even voice, no rear area brightness in it, and a face that had been out in weather for a long time, lined at the eyes, brown and dry, older than the men, maybe older than me. I'm the cold weather and high-angle evaluator. Rays, who do I see about billeting and the ground? Lieutenants in the CP, I said, and I pointed, and I went back to counting fuel. That was the whole of our first conversation. I gave her a direction and a shoulder. I want that on the record too. Behind me I heard the men start in. Soldiers are not subtle. They had been bored for 2 months, and here was something new to chew on, and what they chewed on was that the rear had sent them a clipboard. By chow that night it was all over the post. The snow school lady, the instructor, the box checker, Das, my radio man, did an impression of her writing things down that had half the chow tent laughing. Akafer, the youngest man we had, 18 and still soft, asked me straight out if she was really going to make us do snow drills and a firefight, and I told him no, son, she's going to make us do snow drills so that some colonel can sleep at night, and that is the closest thing to her purpose I believed for 4 days. I should tell you what she actually did in those 4 days, because I did not see it then, or I saw it and did not let it mean anything, and that is its own kind of blindness. She walked the ground. That first afternoon, before she had even drawn a bunk, she went out past our lower wire in the falling light alone and walked the whole of the approach below the post, slow, stopping, looking back up at us, looking at the rock. She did to the lower track and walked into the lead element of a relief column that had pushed up the valley the moment the satellite saw the post go dark. The relief was a full company with a colonel at the head of it, a hard old bird named Hatcher with 30 years on him, who had been pushing his men up that valley all night blind through the storm to get to us, certain he was coming to a massacre. And he came up our roped line in the gray light, counting heads, his face going through something as the count went on and did not stop. 60 men coming down off a rock he'd written off, wounded in the middle, alive, and he got to me at the front and he said, "Sergeant, who has the post? Who's your commander?" And I said, "Lieutenant's down, sir, wounded, alive, he's on the litter." The garrison was held and brought down by our cold weather evaluator. I heard how it sounded as I said it. The evaluator, the clipboard. It sounded absurd. 60 men brought off a mountain by a snow school instructor, and I saw the colonel's face start to make the same easy joke I had made 4 days before, the joke about the rear sending up a box checker. And then she came down out of the storm at the back of the line, the last man off the mountain, exactly as she'd said she would be, with the snow gone to ice on her parka and the long gun across her chest, walking, not hurrying, never hurrying. And Colonel Hatcher, 30 years a soldier, hard as the rock we'd come off of, looked at the woman walking out of the white at the rear of our column, and the easy joke died on his face. He went still in a way I did not understand. He took 2 steps toward her through the snow, and he stopped, and he said a single word, and the word was not her rank, and it was not the word *evaluator*. The word he said, quiet, was a name I had never heard, a call sign, and he said it like a man saying a thing out of his own history he never thought he'd say to a living face. "Northwall," he said. She stopped, she looked at the old colonel for a moment across the snow, and something passed between the two of them, 2 old soldiers that the rest of us were not part of and could only watch. And the colonel said to her, but loud enough that his whole company and all 60 of us heard it, "I trained on your manual. Every cold-weather soldier in this army trained on your manual. The high-angle defense doctrine, the wolf's tooth." He shook his head slowly. "They told me you'd gone to the schoolhouse. Nobody told me they'd sent you up here." And that is when I understood what I had been laughing at for 4 days. The thing they sent up from the rear to check our boxes. The clipboard. She was the woman who had held the wolf's tooth, a stand that the men in my generation had heard about as something close to a legend, one operator and a piece of high ground against a column, a stand so studied that the army had built its entire cold weather and high-angle defense doctrine out of how she'd done it. The manual. The manual every man on that mountain had trained from, the manual with a name on the cover that none of us had ever connected to a living person, the manual that had taught us, second-hand and badly, the exact thing she had just done in front of us in the snow. She had not been sent up to evaluate our snow school. She was the snow school. The doctrine was her, made into a book, and we had been living inside her own teaching the whole winter without knowing whose teaching it was, and when the storm came she had simply stepped out of the book and done the thing the book was written about. I think about Hatcher saying that call sign for the rest of my life. I think about the manual the way you'd find it in any cold weather unit, dog-eared, coffee-stained, the name on the cover gone gray with handling and never once read as a name. Raise. We had laughed at the author of the book we owed our lives to. We had told her she could check her boxes. What happened next is the photograph on my wall, except there is no real photograph, only the one in me, and it is the reason I am setting all this down. The colonel started to bring his hand up to salute her the way you would an officer to a legend, and she stopped him. Quiet, flat, the same voice. "Not yet, sir," she said. "I've got men with frostbite and a lieutenant who needs a surgeon inside the hour. Salute me after they're warm." And she turned away from the colonel, from the salute, from her own name being spoken in the snow, and she went down the line of my men, the men she just carried off a mountain, checking faces, checking hands, telling Prout where to take the lieutenant, getting people moving toward warmth, because that was the only thing that mattered to her, and the rest of it, the legend, the call sign, the manual, the 30-year colonel ready to salute her, all of it could wait behind the warmth of a single private's hands. I was standing in the snow watching her deflect a colonel's salute so she could go check on a boy's frostbite, and I did the thing I have never done freely in 22 years. I came to attention. Nobody ordered it. The colonel had not done it yet. She had told him to wait. There was no formation, no flag, no ceremony, just gray light and falling snow and a worn-down senior NCO who had spent 4 days treating a legend like furniture. But I had watched that woman do, calm and alone, the most complete soldiering I will ever see after I had laughed at her, after I had handed her my men only because I was too afraid to be a fool, and I found that my body had made a decision my mouth never could. My heels came together in the snow. My hand came up. I held it. And down the line of my men, who had watched her hold the notch and light the dark with painted stones and bring every one of them home, the same thing started to happen, one man and then another with no order given. Akafor first, the youngest, his hands shaking with cold, and then Das, and then men I'd have sworn were too tired to lift an arm, 60 frostbitten men coming to attention in a snowstorm at the bottom of a mountain. Holding a salute at the back of a woman who had told a colonel to wait and gone to warm a private's hands. She did not turn around for a long moment. When she did, when she saw it, 60 of us and a colonel and a whole relief company standing at attention in the falling snow with no one having said a word, she did not smile and she did not soften and she did not make it about herself. She looked at us for a moment the way you'd look at something you understood completely and had seen before and would see again. And then she said the last thing I ever heard her say on that mountain, and it was not about the wolf's tooth or the manual or the stand she just made. "I had the high ground," she said, "and you all came when I called. Now go get warm, that's an order." And she put us back to work. That is the whole of it, near enough. The relief got us down. Marsh the lieutenant lived and is a captain now and a good one, and he keeps her manual on his desk where he can see the name. Akafor stayed in, made sergeant, runs cold weather training for a battalion and runs it right, the way she showed him in 40 seconds in the dark. And I am told he tells the story of the notch to every cherry who comes through, and that he always ends it the same way, by holding up the manual and reading the name on the cover out loud, slow, so the young ones hear it as a name and not a word, the way none of us did. I went and found out the rest of it later, the way you do in pieces from Hatcher and from the record, the wolf's tooth, the stand, the doctrine, the call sign the colonel said in the snow. All of it was real and all of it was hers, and she had carried all of it up that bird to Kestrel and set it down with her rucksack and let us call her a clipboard, and never once in 4 days of our laughing had she told us a single piece of it, because she did not need us to know who she was to do what she did. The legend was not the thing she was holding onto. The men were the thing she was holding onto. The legend was just the truth, sitting quiet underneath, waiting for the mountain to show it the way the mountain shows everything in its own time to men too proud or too tired to see it on their own. I'm an old soldier now and I have made my peace with most of what I have done and not done. But I have not made my peace with those 4 days, and I do not want to because the shame of them is the most useful thing I own. When some new soldier comes up to me certain about a person they have decided does not matter, the box checker, the clipboard, the quiet one in the corner who walks the ground alone, I tell them about the snow school instructor. I tell them I laughed at her for 4 days. I tell them she stood in the notch I'd let go to ruin and held a mountain in a storm she described to my face, and lit our way down off it with stones she'd painted while I did her impression in the chow tent and brought 60 of us home, and told a colonel to wait so she could warm a boy's hands. I tell them she never raised her voice and never broke and never, not once, asked for the thing she had every right in the world to ask for, which was for us to know who she was. And I tell them about the snow and the gray light and the way it felt to come to attention with no one ordering it for the first time in my life freely, for a woman I had treated like furniture, because she had shown me, in the worst 9 hours I have ever lived, exactly what a soldier is. It is not the rank and it is not the legend and it is not the noise. It is the one who walks the ground when no one is watching and gets ready while everyone laughs and is calm when everything breaks, and stays at the back so the cold comes to her first and brings everyone home, and then goes to warm the hands of the youngest before she will let anyone say her name. That is the soldier I stood at attention for in the snow. I would do it again on my knees.